Meet Dr. Rauvynne Sangara. She's the next badass birth warrior who will share her story to help the squad navigate through the complex and inspiring journey of pregnancy, labor, birth, and motherhood. In this episode, we are talking about non traditional families. During the interview, you may notice some medical terms or jargon, but don't worry, we got you. We have included definitions and explanations in the episode description, so please listen up and enjoy her story. Welcome back to the Birth Squad, Season 2. I'm Dr. Kamisha Thomas.
And I'm Dr. Ijama Okwandu.
Well, I'm super excited and delighted to introduce our next birth warrior on this episode. She is a maternal fetal medicine physician in training, a former colleague, and a very dear friend, Dr. Rauvynne Sangara. We're so excited to have you today. We wanted to start by asking you to introduce yourself and then share a little bit of your background with us.
Yeah, so I'm Rauvynne. As Kamisha mentioned, we trained together in residency. I'm Canadian. I grew up in Vancouver. Most of my family is still there now. And then I kind of made my way down to the East Coast of the States, trying to get into medical school. So I moved to Boston to do a master's. And then I ended up staying there for medical school where I met Natalia, who's my now wife. We had our first beautiful baby boy about a year and a half ago, and then we have another one on the way now. So for Luca, my first son, we didn't find out until he was born. Um, as Kamisha said, I'm an OB, so I wouldn't look at the ultrasounds when we had all of our anatomy scans and stuff done. And then the plan was to do the same for this baby. And I had a fetal echo done. So I didn't look at all during the anatomy scan. And then during the fetal echo, the sonographer was getting like amazing views of the heart. So I was watching. And then she scanned down really quickly to the pelvis to get the femur. And I saw the scrotum. And so then I didn't say anything. And I'm lying there and I left the appointment. And I was like, should I just not say anything? And then I couldn't. So then I called Natalia and I was like, okay, I know what we're having. Do you want to know? And she's like, what? Like, what do you mean? And so then we ended up like double checking the NIPT and I ended up scanning myself a couple days later. So we know that this one's a boy too.
Aw, that is so sweet. Now, what motivated you and Natalia to start a family? Can you kind of walk us through the process of planning for parenthood as a same-sex couple?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about this question, before we started, and I think for me, I kind of always it was always in my plan. Like it wasn't something that I even considered, I guess. I just had in my mind that, I wanted to go to university, I wanted to go to medical school, and then I wanted to get married at some point, and have kids. That just seemed like the natural progression. And I think Natalia felt the same. What's different for us is that she grew up knowing that she was gay from a very young age. So for her, I think part of that, she still knew that she always wanted to have children. For her, as she got older, she knew kind of, she would think about adoption or IVF or whatever it was going to be. Whereas for me, I actually didn't grow up thinking or knowing that I was gay. I kind of, and Kamisha knows this, but I met Natalia in medical school and just really fell in love with her and felt that she was the person that I was meant to be with. Um, and when that happened, for me, a lot of the, okay, how are we going to have kids? And what's that going to look like? And I don't want to, I want to have biological children. And what's that going to be like? And a sperm donor. And so all of those sort of things were really scary initially. And at that time, I was just a medical student. I didn't know I was going to be an OBGYN. And actually, a really good friend of mine who's also an OB, I remember sitting there with her and I said, what? I'm not going to be able to have kids. And she goes, that's dumb. She's like, even if you're in a hetero relationship, you might not be able to have kids either. Like you don't, she's like, you don't know what's going to happen. And then I was like, yeah, you're right. And I think with time, those sort of worries go away and you just, you know, I realize I'm in love with this person and this is the person I want to spend my life with, and sort of we'll figure it out as we go. And then fortunately for us, I did OB. And so the exposure that we have to IVF and IUI and all of the assisted reproductive techniques made it a lot easier, I think, because we just understand it a lot better. I think initially, yeah, I had a lot of thoughts about it, a lot of worries. But as the process happened, as we started to try everything, this sounds silly to say because it's not natural, it's so scientific, but it felt actually pretty natural. Even choosing our sperm donor felt like a big undertaking, but when we actually sat down and Natalia and I were looking at anonymous profiles, we came upon the donor and we both just it didn't take long. Like we both looked at each other and we're like, "Oh, we love this guy." And we kind of moved forward from there. So, I think things really fell into place.
As Rauvynne mentioned, trying to conceive in a same sex couple can look quite similar to another couple's journey.
In the world of fertility, there are a few options that a couple or even a single parent can pursue. We will break those down for you right now.
Option 1, using your egg and a sperm donor. Now, this can be a friend or an anonymous donor. Some people can do this at home or through a fertility clinic where they undergo intracervical insemination, commonly known as artificial insemination.
Option 2. So, this is an option for a same sex couple, which entails freezing you or your partner's egg and using a sperm donor. This is when you seek out a fertility clinic and get your eggs frozen. Then, at a later date, you can decide if you want to use your or your partner's egg. This egg will then be frozen and implanted into whoever wishes to carry the baby.
Option 3 is making an embryo. Again, this is when you or your partner gets their egg frozen and make an embryo immediately. This can be placed inside you, your partner, or a gestational carrier when you are ready.
Which brings us to option 4, a gestational carrier, which is an option that can exist for same sex couples or for heterosexual couples. This is when you either use your sperm with a donor egg or your egg with donor sperm and have another individual carry the pregnancy for you. Some couples will use their sperm and have the gestational carrier also be the genetic parent.
It's important to note that some heterosexual couples will use a donor egg or sperm if one partner is unable to provide the genetic material. This can be placed inside a member of the couple, or again, a gestational carrier can be used.
Yes, Annie, John, and I wanted to also share each of our stories with you.
So for me, I decided to have an egg preservation procedure when I was 33. It was a time in my life where I knew I wanted children in the future, but the timing was just not right. I was also aware that it can become more challenging to conceive after the age of 35, and the risk of creating eggs with abnormal chromosomes also increases. So this is why I decided to do it. The process can actually be quite expensive, sometimes costing upwards of 10 to 15K. The biggest expense is actually the medication. So for the procedure, some insurances or even your actual companies may actually cover this procedure, but many do not. But make sure you ask so you know what your benefits are. And if you don't have that coverage, plan early and start saving those coins.
In my case, I did an egg retrieval when I was 32. As Robin mentioned, we had exposure to this procedure and fertility in general in our training program. The entire process for me was around 2 weeks of injecting medication and getting frequent ultrasounds to monitor my response. What I found to be the hardest part was the post procedure recovery. The procedure itself was only an hour or two, but I had a lot of nausea and vomiting from it, which can be common. We hope hearing our stories was helpful for you, and we hope that if you have more questions or concerns, you put it in the comments section. Okay, now back to Rauvynne's story. Do you feel like there were any challenges that you can recall? Or, it could be financial, physical, emotional. Like what do you recall about that period?
Yeah, I think being in medicine, obviously a lot of our friends the same age as us are going also through IVF. And at some points I felt, I knew that this was going to be our only choice. And so it seemed almost easier. Whereas a hetero couple might be frustrated, after trying for 6 months or a year and then have to IVF as an alternative option. Whereas we kind of already knew that that's what we were in for. So that in some ways made it feel easier. We had started with IUI and I actually got pregnant on our first try, but it was a biochemical pregnancy. And then I had a couple of transfers that failed. And so when you go through that, then you start feeling like, is this ever going to work? And then the thought is, well, this is our only option. And it seems a little bit unfair. Like, we can't have, this is the only way that we can make, start our family. So there were points where you think like, gosh, I hope this works because this is the only way we can do it. Um, Obviously, adoption is always an option, and we talked about that as well. And it's something that I think we're both open to. But really, thankfully for us, it worked out, and we were able to have, Luca, and then now another son on the way.
Now, can you tell us a little bit more about your pregnancy and birth experience for you and your partner together?
Yeah, it's interesting. Because the people that like our infertility doctors and then actually even my OB already knew me, so already knew that I was in a same-sex relationship. There was never any awkwardness or questions about um, my fertility, or like when I go to triage and say, oh, it's an IVF pregnancy, people assuming that it's because I, for whatever reason, am infertile. And then even with our scans and things like that, when we're both in the room together, people already know that we're together. So it's not like, oh, where is your husband, or whose sperm is this? And I realize now, because I'm scanning people and I'm dealing with IVF pregnancies, that that takes a lot of the what can be very awkward, like awkwardness and sort of conflict out of it, because everybody already knows us. When we got to the delivery, again, I think they already knew. So we show up there, Natalia and I, and nobody is really asking, like, oh, who's this? Like, is this your sister or friend or whatever? So I think we're lucky in that way. And I think for other couples that might have been very challenging, like going to doctor's appointments and going to triage and things like that. Um, Natalia never sort of pictured in her mind that she would ever carry a pregnancy. So she grew up sort of thinking that when she got married or tried to have children, that her partner would likely be the one to carry. And I grew up not even considering that I might not be the one that's pregnant. And so that again works out for us. A lot of the experience of being pregnant, Kamisha knows I'm not somebody that's like, I love being pregnant. Like, I think it's really amazing. I think pregnancy is a miracle, but I honestly, it's not enjoyable. But things like feeling the baby move and, feeling your belly grow, Natalia does say like, wow, like what does that feel like? And it really is a unique thing that only obviously I have the experience with. And then now when Luca was born, was very bonded to me because I breastfed. And I think a lot of after he was born, for me, I was the birth mother. And so I think I could really relate to all birth mothers, whether they be in a same sex or a different sex relationship. Whereas for Natalia, I do think there are challenges that are unique to a non birthing mother as opposed to a father. And those are things that I think were challenging, as they are for every parent and every non birthing parent. But I think they were challenging for her, especially in the beginning. He's crying, and the only one that can make him stop crying is me because of the milk. And that's hard when you're not the birthing parent. I think it was a little bit hard in the beginning.
How did your family, both your families, I guess, react when you guys said, "Hey, we're going to start our family. Like we're planning to like have kids." Did anybody surprise you, or was it kind of like they knew that this was what you guys wanted, so it wasn't like a big deal?
I have a very big, very loving, very unconditionally loving family. And so even when I met Natalia, my mom honestly like couldn't have even she didn't even have a reaction, kind of. She was like, "Okay, great." And most of my family just accepted Natalia and, met her and loved her and saw what we had and loved her as a partner for me. And so kind of moved through that really quickly. And I think it was the same when we started to talk about getting pregnant. I'm the first on my mom's side to have a grandchild. And so it was only excitement. Like it was never sort of, oh, that seemed, how are you guys going to do that? And that seems weird. There was not really any of that, which is really fortunate for us.
Now, one question we do have for you is how did you ensure that both of you had legal rights and recognition as parents?
Yeah, that's a interesting question. Luckily for us, we live in California, and so it is something we looked into because it's not this way in every state. But in California, the birthing parent, so regardless of if the baby is genetically yours or not, the birthing parent is on the birth certificate, and then whoever you designate as the other parent. So for us, when we were in the hospital, they come over and they ask, or they know my name. And then because Luca has like a band with my name on it, and then they ask who the other parent is, and Natalia filled out her name on the birth certificate. And in California, we are his legal parents, and so we never had to go through the adoption process. But we know that in other states, Natalia would have to legally adopt him to be recognized as the legal parent, even though she's on his birth certificate. And so if we do move, that's something that we'll be very like sort of judicious about.
That's so difficult. I didn't even realize that that's an issue from state to state. I
Yeah.
didn't. Do you feel like you or Natalia experienced any like social stigma or like misconceptions when, on your path towards motherhood currently as you guys continue this journey in parenthood?
Because of the field, we're both physicians, we're both surrounded by mostly other physicians that are quite liberal because of where we live. My When I was younger, my worry, and I don't really think about it now because I think of where we live, and Luca has two loving parents. My worry would be that, like, say we were walking down the street and holding hands, and there's another young kid, like a 5-year-old kid, And he looks at us and then he's confused because he's never seen, you know, two women together. And then he goes home or whatever, then he asks his mom, "Oh, why are those women holding hands?" Or, "What does that mean?" And depending on how the parent reacts, like, that might be very confusing for a child. And Kamisha knows this. I'm a people pleaser and I don't like to like cause any conflict. And so I used to worry that what we were doing and the decisions that, we were making in our lives may affect other people negatively. And now as I've gotten older and we have a family and I have a son, um, I more feel that it's okay. Kids need to be exposed to different ways of living in the same way, whether it's a same-sex couple or, you know, diversity in the form of different cultures, different races. What we need is exposure and acceptance. And so I now feel like it's a good thing. Like it's a good thing that that kid might go home and wonder, "Oh, mom, why were those two women holding hands walking down the street?" And I still worry about Luca, the day he comes home, and I know Natalia worries too and says, my who's my dad, or why don't I have a dad? And what are we gonna say? And is he gonna be upset? Or is he gonna just, maybe he won't even ask us. Maybe he'll be like, "Oh, I told little Johnny that I have two moms. I don't have a dad." You can't predict those things. And I think I try to now focus on just the fact that he has a loving house and two loving parents. And yes, there will be challenges for us that are unique because he doesn't have a dad, but every couple, whether you're a man and a woman or a man and a man, is going to have challenges with their kids, and the kids are going to come home from school and ask questions that are hard, and you're going to have to find a way to explain it to them. All we can do is do our best, and I think be loving and kind and try to be accepting. And that's kind of now what I try to focus on when I get worried about things like that.
Wow. We wanted to take a moment to thank Rauvynne for being vulnerable and sharing her fears with us. She's exactly right. Exposure and acceptance is important. And sharing different ways of living is why we asked her to share her story.
Yes, we hope you enjoy her and other unique stories and experiences. Now let's hear how the story ends. In the face of those types of challenges, are there any like community resources that you found helpful in your journey?
We actually don't have a lot of gay friends that have children. We have a few, but we don't sort of have that community. We do have lots of gay friends that I think when you surround yourself with people that are living the same life as you, it makes things a little bit easier. And like I said, sort of where I've come from in my life, hearing other people's stories and the things that they've gone through and how they've dealt with things does help me to kind of move through the challenges that I feel. For me, like, especially having Luca, the challenges that I felt were more related to just being a parent and juggling being a new parent and then your relationship with your significant other, which are things and challenges that all of our friends with new babies are experiencing. And so that's kind of the community that I go to.
When you think about those same sex couples who you are friends with, if they were to come to you to for advice because they're like considering parenthood, what would you tell them? Like, what advice would you share?
Yeah, um I would say the anticipation, like specifically for a sperm donor, because I feel like a lot of people that I've spoken to, that seems like such a difficult process. You're choosing the genetics of your baby, and whether you do somebody you know or someone you don't know, when you think about it too much, can seem very scary. And my advice is just to sit down and do it. Like, sit down, go onto the cryobank and start looking at profiles with your significant other, and kind of seeing what you think, and what you're both, the different things you think are important, whether it's, what did they look like when they were babies, or what's their education, or what does their essay say. You kind of figure out what things are important to you when choosing a donor. You just have to do it. I think a lot of these things, the anticipation and thinking about it is a lot worse than actually sitting down and trying. And if you're thinking about um, starting a family and you've never, for example, talked to an infertility doctor before, go for a consult and see what they say and see what the options are. And I think you'll realize that there are a lot of different options. Yes, it's expensive, and that's something that I don't think is fair. It's not here in California, not covered by insurance. And so a lot of having a family for same-sex couples is financially, how much money do you make? And I don't think that that's fair. And then sitting down and making time to have those hard conversations with your partner, like, who's going to carry, and when are we going to start, and are we both going to have our eggs, retrieved, or is it only going to be one of us, things like that. But again, like, that's the same in a hetero couple. You have to sit down and say, okay, what are we going to do? And if this doesn't work, then, you know, how are we going to proceed? So I think while there are unique challenges, there are also a lot of similarities.
Absolutely. That's really good advice. So now that you're in your second pregnancy, how are things different this time around for you? Is there anything that you like learned from your first pregnancy?
I think a lot of moms out there will agree the second time around is just, it's tough. Um, And I think I'm a little bit older, not too much. Luca's only 20 months, but a little bit older. I never really got back into shape after Luca, and it was on purpose, which I now regret, because I was like, well, if I'm just going to get pregnant again, like, there's no point in trying to get back into shape. But I do think it would have been helpful, because especially in the beginning, I just felt super tired, so winded. um, I felt like it was really hard on my body. And then even now, just physically, your body reacts so differently to the second pregnancy. Things are looser, and I think I gained weight a lot quicker, which was hard. The fatigue, I think a part of it is amnesia. You just forget how tired you were, but it's been really tough, especially now getting into the third trimester. I noticed myself getting super tired and then running around after a toddler. Um, and in the first trimester, I was super nauseous, which was similar with my first pregnancy, but I was now at home on the couch with a toddler that I honestly felt guilty that I couldn't take care of. And I fortunately have a lot of support at home. My mom lives with us, so she takes care of Luca a lot of the day, and I would come home from work and just honestly not be able to take care of him because I was feeling so nauseous or tired. And that it was really sad for me, because getting home after work and spending a couple hours with him was the best part of my day. And so that made the first trimester really tough. And then I started feeling better in the second trimester, and now I'm running around after him with this big belly. So it's definitely unique. And I think you think about, once the new baby's here, how is that going to affect Luca? And I worry about that. He's such a little sensitive, sweet boy. And so I worry that he's going to feel left out or jealous. And I think it's going to be really challenging. but I'm really excited to see kind of what he does and how he interacts with the baby. I think it's going to be such a cool adventure to watch him and how he experiences this new sort of life in our house.
I was going to ask you about some misconceptions that you wish more people knew the truth about.
Every couple is different and unique, and every couple has their own challenges. People probably assume that two women, when they try to start a family, that both women would carry. Like both women would probably be interested or sort of plan for one to carry and then the next baby the other one carry. And I think, like I said, every couple is different, and I think people are sometimes surprised that Natalia never sort of had in her plan that she was going to carry. So I think that is probably a misconception. And then, so I think typically people think that the person that's carrying, it's their embryo. So the mom that's carrying probably the baby's half hers and half whatever sperm donor they use, but really you could do very different things with embryos if both women have had their eggs retrieved. Obviously, it's different for IUI. But I think that lots of couples nowadays have both people freeze embryos and then make their family in sort of whatever way they envision that to be. Lots of people think that both mothers have a sort of mother connection to the baby, whereas I know that Natalia, after Luca was born, actually identified more with like a father role just because of that she wasn't the birth parent. And I think that that's something that like needs to be acknowledged because I think it was really tough for her. Everyone assuming that she felt bonded in the same way to Luca that I did, and we both have really different bonds to him, though they're both very strong.
Those are really good insights. And if you could go back and give yourself some advice, like your past self, is there anything that you would say to yourself?
Would just say it's gonna be okay. Like, don't worry about these stupid things like having a baby gonna look like it doesn't matter. I spent so much energy being worried about that I was choosing a path that was not, normal, and that people were going to look at me and think whatever, that I was weird or different or say things or talk about me, and like they didn't, and it doesn't matter. And if you can live your truth and follow your heart and be kind and be loving and be honest, things will like fall into place, and hopefully the people around you will do that too. What mattered was that I found the person that I feel that I was meant to be with, and not everyone does, and that for me was very lucky. And now here we are, and we have a beautiful son, and another one on the way, and I think that it will turn out okay if you can kind of let those worries go away and just try to move forward in your life with love and with kindness.
Thank you for all those insights that you shared with us, Robin. Those were amazing. And we kind of just wanted to wrap up the interview by asking, is there anything else that you would love to share with our listeners with the Birth Squad?
I would just say that, as an OBGYN and as a mom, I was it's so hard. Pregnancy is hard and motherhood is hard. And that is not acknowledged enough. And so for all the new moms out there, or moms that are, even if you have multiple kids, like, women are amazing. And it's something that really, as an OBGYN, I feel that we get to like celebrate every day, but really like people that are not in our field need to like acknowledge our field and what these patients and women are doing. And it's incredible. It's really incredible.
Absolutely. Well said. Thank you so much for sharing all of your insights and your experience and being so vulnerable and um, just a lot of good nuggets so that I think a lot of people will learn a lot from. So we really appreciate
Yeah.
you. That's the wrap of this episode of The Birth Squad.
Thank you so much for joining us this week. We are going to continue sharing stories from more badass birth warriors, because at the end of the day, you are the experts of your experience, and we want to highlight you and your bold, brave, and beautiful journey to motherhood.
And we want to hear from you. Tell us about what topics you'd like to hear more about. Hit us up on Instagram at The Birth Squad, and check out our website, thebirthsquad.com.
Most importantly, be sure to share this episode with your squad.
Until next time, I'm Dr. Ijama Okwandu.
And I'm Dr. Kamisha Thomas.
Peace, love, and solidarity from the Birth Squad.